Jack, could you give me your name, spell it,
Okay.
and also give me your title?
Okay, I'm Jack Douglas, Jackdouglas. I'm head of special collections and archives at San Jose State University.
Jack, could you give me an idea of how did you first come to discover the Fallon House?
It's interesting that I should be here in front of the Fallon House after all these years, because when I first came here in the late 50s, I was interested in history in San Francisco, but it didn't occur to me that there was a whole lot to be interested here in San Jose until I started walking around. And this was one of the first buildings that really caught my interest. I saw this building here and I wondered, how could this building be here still? It's so unlike anything else we have in this town. It's not unlike many things you'll see in the East, but for San Jose it was quite unique. And all kinds of basic questions ran through my mind. Who could have built this? What could it have been used for? And at that time I had no idea. I had very little knowledge of San Jose history, and gradually, as I've become more interested in local history and so forth, the history of this place began to evolve, and we found out, I found out, and most of us found out, it was really central to the early history of San Jose. This wasn't just another building, just happened to be left behind when everything else was sort of torn down, but it was an impressive structure in its day, and it still is to this day. If you can see through all the boards and the chip paint and all the rehabbed things that have happened to it over the years, I think it's going to make a wonderful showplace when they get it finished. Fortunately, we have some pretty good records of what it looked like during its heyday, and at that time we had a good deal of landscaping out in front, a nice garden with a fence around it, and it was
Jack, you'll need to
quite a handsome.
If you could, if you look only at me.
Keep looking at you.
Yes,
okay.
Would you be more comfortable if you crossed your arms, or
whatever?
I mean, whatever would feel more natural to you.
Okay, that looks a little. Whatever.
Whatever.
Just relax.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
Yeah.
Great.
But as you were saying.
Well, as I was wandering around town and I saw this building tucked in behind an old store building, and it caught my imagination, and the fact that it was, sort of hidden behind there made you wonder about what sort of mentality was involved here that would cover this old house, and with what by then was a pretty disreputable building in itself. It was later called the Jarrito Cafe. I don't know what it was called then. I'd also heard rumors that our only adobe building was in the neighborhood, and at that time we weren't exactly sure where, but you could look over a fence and see something that looked like adobe building.
Just relax, okay?
Yeah.
When the flames start
Try not to sway back and forth.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
and it was just peeking out. Until then, it was
You need to
really-
stop tape. You need to stop.
I don't know what it was called then. I'd also heard rumors that our only adobe building was in the neighborhood, and at that time we weren't exactly sure where, but you could look over a fence and see something that looked like adobe building.
It occurs to me that there was a great deal of San Jose's past that was simply maybe forgotten or buried in some respects.
Yeah. And that's certainly the case of this neighborhood over here. Downtown was still a thriving, little metropolis when I came here, very much as it had been for any number of years. And this area over here, which was an important part of the city in the 1880s, 1890s, had been forgotten. the area across the street where the adobe is was a storage yard for a plumber, I believe, and you couldn't see the building for the junk that was piled up around it. This building behind us, the Fallon House, was in very much disrepair, but still not changed so much that you couldn't tell what the original character of the building was. And that style is pretty distinct for San Jose, and considering the age of it, was quite unique at the time. That Fallon could build a house like this when most of the rest of the town was still living in what amounted to mud huts was pretty unique, I think. But if you look in the early photographs, this area was an important area for residences at that time. This may have been one of the more elaborate structures, but there were a number of other frame buildings around. Unfortunately, none of which still exist. The St. James Park nearby over here wasn't much more than a place to keep sheep and pigs at that time. It was pretty much a rural agricultural fringe to what was our central city here. Mm-hmm. So the Fallon House must have stood out as a pretty unique home in its day, and I think it still does.
When you first discovered Fallon House, when you first saw the building and then discovered that it was in fact the Fallon House, and that it was adjacent to the Peralta adobe, or what was then an unrestored structure, what was your impression? What was your conclusion about that piece of history?
Well, I think we realized we had a pretty unique little area here, which had structures from the two eras adjacent to each other, and it's worked out pretty well, I think, in the long run, that we'll be able to restore both of these buildings and bring them online as a historical park that will reflect both the Mexican and the later Yankee periods. Fallon himself, as it turned out, wasn't just your average San Jose citizen either. He had a real part in the making of history here in San Jose, and all through his life, in his later life even, he was mayor and had his ups and downs in life as many people at that period had, and in that way he is an interesting, typical character perhaps of a pioneer type who came, was successful, and then had setbacks and so on, and actually died almost in poverty in San Francisco.
What else do you know about it?
Well, I think he's a real character, I think, in many ways. Sort of buccaneer, a soldier of fortune. He left Ireland as a young man, came to America, and seemed to go wherever the winds were blowing and wherever the excitement was the greatest. And it was like many of the early Americans, an opportunist who saw where the advantages were and tried his best to capitalize upon them. In that sense, I suppose he's not any different than a lot of the people we have in San Jose today that have come here for Silicon Valley and so forth.
Why is it important that this house be restored?
Well, this house is, as I said, is pretty unique for this area, and not only architecturally, but because of its significance to Fallon and that period. But not only that, it has a good post-Fallon history, I think, that's also pretty interesting. The fact that generations of Italian immigrants used this as a sort of stopping off point as they came to San Jose and found work in the various vineyards and factories in town. It's like a little Ellis Island in the sense that many lives got their start here. People who came from the old country settled here and lived in this hotel, which was quite a going concern for a number of years. The building also was a school for a while, which has some interest, I think. And of course, the restaurant that's been in the basement here for many, many years has made it sort of a landmark in a sense to many of our local citizens. It was a very popular place, I understand, during the 1930s, during the Big Depression, when they served cheap food here, and if you brought your own bucket, you could carry out as much as you could pay for, and early carry-out service. So it's just has quite a history, I think, that since its very founding. And I think it's nice that we'll be able to restore the building and to use it as not only a symbol, but include various kinds of descriptive programs and so forth that can show newcomers what it was like for various generations of San Jose citizens who came here, of various ethnic backgrounds and social backgrounds. And I think this can all be put together very nicely in this building. Not only inside the building, but with landscaping around the outside. Show the way people lived in the 19th century here in San Jose. Be nice if they could have a real horse or a cow or two in the backyard. I don't know if that'll be worked out, but I've seen the plans and they look pretty impressive.
Do you see it as a potential for really giving us a window into our past, not only as regards to Mr. Fallon, but everything else that happened at this place?
Well, certainly, I think it is a very good window into our past, and with the curatorial expertise of the people at our historic museum, I'm sure it'll be a continuing one and of interest not only to our local citizens, but even visitors, perhaps tourists, who will, I think, flock to this area once it's established as a center for historical reasons, purposes. I can see lots of uses for the Peralta adobe across the street, for festivals and so forth, and Fallon House ties in with that nicely.
Stop tape.
It's speed.
Jack, you were talking about the importance of Fallon House. How does it fit in with the rest of the rest of the effort to be able to tell the history of San Jose, not only in respect to Peralta adobe, but the more comprehensive effort to be able to capture what's happened here?
Well, we have a program of marking historic buildings around the city as well as historic sites. And these tell a little bit about the buildings, but they don't tell you this isn't the way the building was when it was first built. In most cases, these buildings have been changed on the inside, in some cases the out. But in this case, the Fallon House, we're going to have a real example of what life was like in the 1870s and 80s in this valley. And not only with the house restored back to its original elegance, but with the kind of exhibits and so forth that they'll be showing here, and the number of programs they'll be putting on. The museum docents will be here on a regular basis in costume, and will be taking people around on tours. In fact, this will be the headquarters for the downtown tour program, which will take citizens, students, and tourists, whoever, out around the city on walking tours of our historic sites here. So in this sense, it offers much more than almost any other historic...
Stop tape.
Yeah. I can pick up from there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The Fallon House offers us an advantage that we've really wanted out at the Historic Museum. Out there we're attempting to recreate
Stop it.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.